Well, the new OEMs dropped this weekend, boys, and I decided to test all of the 450s so that you don't have to. I know in the past we have said that these bikes are balanced, but I really feel like these bikes are really balanced. And rather than you just taking my word for it, I thought I would show you. What I did here is I took every bike on a track that I am very comfortable on, and I tried to see how long it took me to set a clean lap. Not the fastest lap in the world, just a clean lap that is fast, and then I compared the times. Now, this obviously isn't perfect because I'm just one person, one play style, but I think this proves my point that you can literally jump on any of these bikes and run extremely competitive times. I'll show the times at the end, and boys, I think you're gonna be kind of blown away by this. Now, as a reminder, every single one of these bikes was run in the exact same setup, and that is completely stock, other than I'm running 90 front tire mid-soft and 120 mid-soft rear. The only change I made to any bike was the RM on both the 450 and the 250. That's coming soon, but I did change the mapping to the Yoshi mapping so it actually had some power. The Kawasaki is actually the only bike I don't have a time for because, well, my lap didn't count, and then my recording got all messed up, so I couldn't even see the time there, and I didn't really want to go back and give it an extra try and make it unfair. But I will tell you that I can tell that the time was very close to the other times, right in line with everything. But it took me about 2 laps to get a solid lap on the Kawasaki, and I gotta say, the Kawasaki feels very plush, like almost too plush, if that makes sense, especially at high speeds. It doesn't really hurt you, but it feels overly plush. But I don't know, I actually really liked it. It also feels a little underpowered, but man, is that thing flickable, and it handles really well. I haven't tried this thing in E-Road, but if it's better than the previous update, I think this will be an extremely viable option, especially in outdoors. Next up, I took the Fantic out, and it took me about 3 laps to get a solid time. And boys, does the suspension also feel very plush? But this time it's only in the first stroke. But the second stroke feels super stiff and almost poppy, like it's a little springy wingy, you know what I mean? Not a bad thing, but it's definitely different, especially from the KX that kind of felt plush all the way through. It's definitely harder to turn than the KX as well, but not in like a bad way like the previous OEMs. It just feels a little bit more boaty, if that makes sense. But it seems like this will be a really good option. My suspicion is this thing is going to rip Supercross. Next up, I took out one of my current favorite OEMs, and that is the Gas. And it took me about 6 laps to get a clean lap. And I think that's because this bike is an absolute rocket ship, and it was really difficult for me to tame that. You know, I'm pretty good at the game, but not the best. And this thing was so fast. I think the suspension is rather soft for my liking. It did feel similar to the KX, but because of that extra speed, I felt like I needed to be a little bit stiffer in the suspension. It doesn't turn as good as the KX, but it turns better than the Fantic. But again, like, I want to make a little statement here that I think all of these issues so far, you know, issues I'm putting in air quotes. I don't think these are big issues. I feel like I'm nitpicking here, and any of these issues I could fix with a setup. But you know, here's just my raw thoughts, I guess. Next up, we do have the Honda 450, and I will say I loved every single one of these bikes. I love the Honda, but I had the hardest time gelling with the Honda. It took me, oh gosh, probably 12 tries to get a good lap. And it was very interesting because I had a really good lap probably 10 times, and then as soon as I would hit a certain bump or I would hit something really hard at speed, the rear end just would absolutely yeet you. These whoops here on Mouse Motopark, this bike did not like them, that's for sure. But I gotta be honest, it wasn't my favorite, but I do think that if I spent some time on it and worked on a setup, I could definitely get it to where it was usable. Like, I know that there are some people in the OEM team that they swear by this thing. So don't listen to me like I'm saying the Honda's bad, because I know like Alpha on the OEM team, this is like one of his favorite bikes. Personally, I would put this one towards the bottom, but I know, I mean, it doesn't mean that it's bad. So I would definitely try it. Definitely work on the setup though, because that rear end is a little bucky-wucky, you know? Before we get into the next bike, I do want to remind you guys that I will show all the lap times and kind of give you general feedback at the end of the video. So make sure you stick around for that. But next up, I did have the Husky, as you can see here on the screen. And boys, I put a burner down on lap 1. The Husky felt great out of the box. I mean, probably the bike I gelled with the quickest. Clearly, it was the only bike that I put a fast lap down on lap 1, and it felt really, really good. It felt like it had the power of the gas, but it was flickable like the KX. The rear end did not like going through the whoops, kind of similar to the Honda, but it was able to recover, unlike the Honda. And it just felt extremely intuitive to just jump on and rip, and I would highly suggest the Husky. The thing do be barking. Now let's move on to the bike that pretty much everyone's been riding because of the OEM previews, and that is the KTM. I'm gonna be honest, I was a little bit nervous that I was gonna jump on the KTM and absolutely destroy all of the other times I had been setting, and that it was just gonna be so much better. And you know what? That really wasn't the case. It took me 3 laps to set a solid lap, and I have to be honest, I was really nervous on the KTM. It was really, really fast, but it didn't feel as comfortable as the Husky. It didn't feel as plush as the gas. Like, I don't know, it was strange because it's the bike I have the most time on, but it felt very, very odd to me. It felt off, and obviously it's a solid option because it does rip. I mean, I can put insane laps on this track on the KTM, but it did feel nervous to me. It felt like I wasn't in control. It felt like at any moment it was twitchy and it was gonna crash. You know, I mean, that just could be me. Clearly it's the dominant bike right now, and I do feel like that on the current OEMs, that it's twitchy and I'm about to crash, and I think that a lot of people feel that way, but it still rips. So I think a setup could help that, but yeah, there's my thoughts on the KTM. Let's move on to one of the biggest surprises in this group of bikes, and that is the Suzuki. Now, I didn't really think the Suzuki was going to be terrible because the current Suzuki actually barks, but I did not expect this thing to be this much fun and this fast. I genuinely low-key, I don't know if that's a thing, but the Suzuki could be a top 3 bike in MX bikes. The Suzuki 450 is actually insane. Now, again, this is with the Yoshi mapping, so I have actual power. The Suzuki might be my favorite bike to ride. I'm no kizzy. I don't know if it's the best, but man, is it fun. The suspension is absolutely cracked, and then you combine that with the Yoshi mapping and she rips. The only issue is it liked to swap in the whoops, which caused me to crash a lot, and it turns pretty wide. I think that has to do with it being like 675,000 pounds, but that also helps it be really, really stable. I think both of those issues can be improved upon through setup, but definitely don't sleep on the Zook. All right, since we're talking about surprises, let's talk about the TM. Now, listen, the TM is the TM, and boy, is it the TM. It's very strange. It has a weird center of gravity. It feels weird, but hear me out. It rips. This bike actually rips, and it feels slow, and it feels like it doesn't handle well, but it kind of does. Like, I don't know how to explain it. It took me about 5 laps to get a good lap, and well, it was just very unexpected how it felt. You know, by this time in my testing, it had set one of the fastest laps, and I don't know if it was just my inner LAN event player coming out, but the TM does rip, dude. I will say it is still the TM. Like I said earlier, it's odd, it feels weird, and when things go bad on the TM, they go bad pretty quick. But you know, we all rode the TM for the LAN event qualifiers, and we all found setups to make it somewhat decent, and I think that this is an improvement on what we had before. Last but not least, we have the Yamaha, and much like the KTM, I was pretty nervous about this bike. I was really scared that this bike with the new updates was going to be extremely good, and all of a sudden it was going to be the best bike, and the time was going to go crazy, and it was going to blow all the other bikes out of the water. And you know what? I can comfortably say I don't think that that was the case. The Yamaha felt extremely, and I mean extremely, nervous in chattery bumps to me. The rear end liked to slide across the bumps instead of just kind of absorb and go with them. And I found myself crashing a lot on this bike. It used to feel very planted, and I don't really feel that anymore. It steered similar to the Fantic, and it had really good power. And honestly, even though I did set a pretty fast lap on this thing, I felt really uncomfortable on it the whole time. And I'm like, again, like all the other bikes, I'm sure some setup changes could help that, but this may be one of my least favorite bikes, which is really interesting for me in outdoors. But yeah, all right, let's move on to my overall general thoughts. All right, boys, well, here you go. Here are all the lap times up on the screen. And as you can see, other than the Honda, Basically, they were all within a half second of each other, or like really just a few tenths, to be honest. And really, that is just incredible to me. This is me just jumping on the game, jumping on the bikes, no practice on any of them, me just seeing how fast could I set a fast time. And if you guys have ridden the Mouse Motopark, you know 58s, I mean, that's a pretty solid lap. Like that is really, really fast. Anything under 2 minutes is flying on that track. And so I was able to jump on literally any one of these bikes and put solid laps down. Most of them, it took me 3 to 5 laps, with a couple of the bikes taking up to 10. But basically, if I was trying to qualify for aerial, I could basically jump on any one of these bikes and qualify a very solid time on the Mouse Motopark in less than 10 laps. And I think that that's really impressive. I did another one of these shootouts before in the past on the Beta 17 bikes, I believe. And it was nothing like, it was not within tenths, it was seconds separating them. And I think this should be really encouraging to you guys. I know that in the past we've said the bikes are balanced and everyone's like, yeah, whatever OEM team or whatever doc, you're just paid to say that, which is absolutely crap. In this case, I wanted to prove to you and show you, look, I can jump on these bikes, spin a lap, and I can be competitive. Now, do I have favorites and do I have bikes I don't like? Of course. I did not gel with the Honda. It's weird because I actually really liked it. The first time I jumped on it, I really liked the Honda. Now I didn't really vibe with it. I think maybe if I put more time into it and a setup, I definitely need to set up. But I really like the Suzuki. I really like the Husky and the Gas. And honestly, the Cowie. You know, I mean that's like half the bikes. You know, I feel like I could jump on any one of those bikes and be really, really competitive, if I'm being honest. It'll be interesting to see how they all handle an E-Road, because you know that's something I can't really test on my own. I mean, I could, I just don't have the time to be doing that. So, you know, I really like the KX in the current version of the OEMs. I really liked it. I like it more than the KTM until E-Road, and then the KX really just falls apart. So hopefully that's not the case. But really, I just wanted to prove to you guys and show you that, like, look, these bikes are competitive. There's not one bike that is like seconds off of the rest. And there's not one bike, more importantly, that is seconds ahead of the rest. That was something I was more concerned about. Not that there being like one terrible bike, but that there was one bike that was just like infinitely better, like the current KTM. And I really don't think that's the case. If you like this video, I have a surprise. There will be a 250 shootout video coming out in the next couple of days. So make sure you look out for that. And boys, I'm just excited. Bikes is in the W place. I love you, and I will see you in the next one.